But demand doesn't bring forth supply without work, production. So our whole way of economic thinking, which applies to everything, but is very apparent in the food supply, is we actually think consumption matters more than production.
In this day, there is a lot of passion around nature and the land, but I think we all have a similar question of how we are supposed to direct that passion. In this podcast, I try to get people reconnected to the land and better understand what our role as a species is on it. I do this through having conversations with people who I believe can offer examples, ideas, or information that can help us figure out the answer to that question. Well, we're both reading Sex, Economy, Community, and Freedom right now, which is an essay by Wendell Berry. It's like a 30-page long essay, right? I think.
Yep.
Is what it is. It's kind of interesting. Like I see how people may just have some discourse as to, like the foundation of what he's talking about in that essay is kind of people will hold each other accountable. And I think that's an interesting concept because right now that's just not what's happening at all within like government and so many other things. But in particular, you could that's what he's addressing.
Yeah.
And I feel like if you were to just be able to find some sort of problem within his principle of his argument in that essay, that would be it. Is the fact that he's just putting too much faith in people. And you and I were talking about earlier, if like original sin, people are going to be prone to doing sinful things. And that's not a problem that I necessarily find with it, but I can see how people would kind of arrive at that conclusion.
I think that all of us of faith, and particularly in the context of our culture here, we take our faith seriously, so we need to take the reality of original sin seriously and actual sin seriously.
Yes.
And in the process of doing that, we can forget that God made us good as the summit of his creation, to exercise dominion over creation, to tend the garden that he placed us in.
Right.
And so we have to remember fundamentally, there's a great goodness to people and a desire in their hearts to be good. And so original sin is a fact. You can, by the way, it's not just a sort of a theological fact, in my opinion. It's an observable reality in human history and everywhere we go in the present.
Right.
People are tend toward the darkness of selfishness, greed, suspicion, envy, an irrational competitiveness, not a healthy competitiveness. So we have to hold both those things in our minds and in our hearts, that God loves us. He loves you and me, and he loves human beings even in our fallen state. I mean, we're verging on Holy Week now.
Yeah.
Sunday's Palm Sunday. I mean, we can't reflect enough in the coming week of what it meant for God in the person of Jesus Christ to give himself through all that he knew for our redemption.
Right.
And so we are graced, blessed to participate in this period between life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ and the consummation of the world. In this period where we, in a sense, are kind of operating behind enemy lines to try to restore creation and the human role in creation to its divine intent.
Sure.
And I would say the thing that you described about Wendell Berry is a phrase that I try to use to describe it with limited success, is the moral discipline of small places. Like, I've been blessed. I've been in big cities. But I fundamentally grew up in a relatively small town agrarian environment where the downside of that is people know everybody and they know everybody's business.
Yeah.
And But when you go to seek the anonymity of the city, you lose the moral discipline of small places, which is it doesn't pay to be a jerk in a small environment. Like fundamentally, you've lost your anonymity.
Yeah.
And if you are known as someone who is duplicitous, treacherous, unreliable, a liar, a cheat, hopefully people have mercy toward you because you're struggling, but more, people will know.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's it is not that small town people are better people. It's we have more reasons to behave.
Yeah.
In a positive way.
It's interesting because I find, the homestead movement is a lot about trying to become more independent,
Yeah.
and trying to grow your own food and be more accountable for your own lifestyle, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm.
And it is interesting to me as like, when you start to live that lifestyle, you become more reliant on people around and next to you.
Yeah, you.
But when you're not living in that lifestyle, you become reliant to people you don't know who they are.
Right.
And I think that's when that's how you're able to look past a lot of things. Is because you're not meeting and looking those people in the eyes. So it's a lot easier to wrong them.
And I would rather immerse myself in the human reality of what it's like to actually need each other.
Yes.
In our brokenness. And hopefully we've got people that are striving to live better. Hopefully we're striving to live closer to God and be a force for good around us.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, this idea of I'm going to do my own independent thing as a homesteader. I mean, you learn that's what you need community more than ever.
Yeah.
You need people you can turn to. And, even in the 2 years we've been doing our little farm project, look at the relationships around us. And those people really matter.
Yeah. And that was something that
and we can matter to them. And we do.
Yeah, for sure. I think, you saw bits of that on the island of community, and people really wanted that because we were on the island for 8-9 years. And then we moved to La Crosse for the past 2.
Yeah.
And there was a very unique community aspect to the island.
On an island, it's intensely clear how much people need each other.
Yeah.
And you could see all of the brokenness. You could see, I could tell you names of people who barely talk to each other. They really dislike each other. But they're on the fire department together. They're on the rescue squad together. Somebody's got a problem, and the island shows up. And those differences, it's not that they are healed and gone, but they are set aside for the moment because people know they need each other.
Right.
In a way you wouldn't. There's an ocean of people if you live in a city that you can find that might help you out, but there's not that many people on the island once the tourists go home.
Yeah.
In, late August, early September. And it's a long winter and there aren't that many young people, and people need each other and they appreciate that they need each other and they know what community is. And it's not a different truth from anywhere else. It's just more unavoidable.
Yeah, because you're on an island, and those are the people that you have.
These are the people you have. and that's just it's a more intense it's like a petri dish of what life is actually like throughout the world.
Right.
So, we can't forget. It's just awesome that we have the gift of faith.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, in my opinion, it helps to have the richness of the Catholic faith and the tradition and the writings and the understanding, for 2,000 years. Not that other people of faith don't have, access to stuff that can help them think that through, but we're very blessed that we have faith and that it gives us, the motivation to struggle to be a better man.
Right.
A better neighbor, a better friend, better father, better son, better.
I was talking to one of my friends at Michigan Tech like last week, I think it was, of kind of this weird phenomenon that's happening of just young people, in particular young men, turning towards the faith right now within society. And a lot of it that we kind of said was kind of just because, whether you like to admit it or not, like, men right now are kind of being told within society a lot of ways to live life in a wrong way, or that they are living their life in a wrong way. And when you provide them with a system and an environment that teaches them how to do it the right way, they're going to naturally gravitate towards that. And there's a lot of good principles within, really any system of Christianity, but in particular, like Catholicism and Orthodox churches, I would say, are just like particularly very strong with that. And it's just a unique phenomenon of like, there's lots of young men going towards that purely just because it's like, it's a system that supplies them with the moral and ethical rules, I guess, to try and follow to be a good person, and like the community around them to hold them accountable to that.
Yeah. I first of all, we never want to instrumentalize the faith.
Yeah.
I mean, the faith is not about embracing a set of rules that are helpful. It has rules and they are helpful, but we don't live the Christian faith because it helps us. We live the Christian faith because it's true.
But it providing some need in your life is a great way to start that process.
Yeah, and what the availability of a structure and a system of thought, but above all, the faith is about a relationship with a person, Jesus Christ, Son of God, and God the Father,
right.
Who's our Father, right? The best Father ever.
When
you have a bad day with me, remember, He's the real deal.
Yeah, right.
I'm striving to be His son so I can be your father. But the structure I think is attractive, but also I can't explain what's happening with young people because it isn't just men, but it is striking now. I travel, I've traveled for years. And
especially in colleges.
Yeah.
You've seen like a lot of the Newman centers on the UW campuses.
Oh yeah. They're flourishing. Where they have good pastoral leadership, they're flourishing. And I think you see it, like I see it, I travel around the state. I travel, Minnesota, different, Chicago, different sort of regional places for my work. And I try to go to mass, and it's really quite striking in the last 3-4 years. They're just, you look around you and what used to be nothing, but I could have been the youth leader at most of those masses. And now, there's young people that show up. Or you look at like St. Charles in Genoa. It's a very beautiful thing to go to a small rural church that I would have expected 10 years ago or 5 years ago to just see a bunch of gray-haired people like me. Who, by the way, I love old people. I am one, but it's very heartening to look out and see the young families.
Yeah.
And it's good to see men, I'll just say it. I mean, I think really throughout, I can remember back to my time on the East Coast in grad school and stuff. I mean, there was a kind of like a really heavy kind of anti-men presence.
Yeah.
Or a presumption that everything about what's intrinsic to masculinity is somehow toxic.
And also, like, I'll say this as well, like, putting critiques out there is like totally fine. If you see a mass societal direction that's bad, critiquing that isn't a problem. Whether or not it was there is a different question, but critiquing is not the problem. The problem is like, you can't just point out what's wrong. Like, can you give people something to go for and to like try to achieve?
I mean, there is such a thing as toxic masculinity.
Yeah, absolutely.
But newsflash, there is such a thing as toxic femininity too.
Yes.
And Adam and Eve were both in the garden. And I'm not going to blame her entirely for, the serpent thing, but she was there. And Adam had agency. In other words, it's original sin and actual sin. This problem that all humanity deals with is not a masculine phenomenon. It's a human phenomenon. that has masculine characteristics and feminine characteristics.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I'll also say that, well, no, I'm not going to say that.
Well,
but what?
So why? That's fine.
It's
okay to self-censor.
It wasn't a fully thought out statement, so I wasn't going to.
Well, we're allowed to say stupid stuff.
I suppose
there's a little bit of what I think has gone on with men that they're kind of letting loose the. Wait a minute, I can be a guy,
right?
And in fact, God wants to sanctify my masculinity,
right?
He doesn't want to stifle it, kill it, stomp on it, root it out,
make you feel bad about it.
No, he wants to purify, sanctify with your cooperation,
right?
And people see that, men see that, young men see that. I mean, at a purely practical level, the discipline of confession, it's a pretty good thing. Examination of conscience.
It's kind of like a therapy session you could compare it
I mean, it's because grace builds on nature. Right. It's not like, what do you do when you go to a therapist who's a secularist? I mean, you try to be honest about yourself, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I wouldn't, I'm not arguing for confession instead of therapy. If you need therapy, I'm not arguing for that. Yeah. But we're sort of talking about how once a man sort of a person has a direction, desire to be better, live better, serve better. You know, there's a structure to really help, not just with accountability, but it would be accountability even if it wasn't grace. It's accountability with grace, with the power in the sacraments. And if you practice sincerely, you get all of that. Why wouldn't you want that?
Right. I mean, yeah, at the end of the day, it is just trying to create like some kind of format for people to follow to be good people, you know? And I think there's...
Yeah, but the essence of the sacrament is to place you back in communion
with God,
with God, with Jesus. It's not doesn't directly have... The result of it is inevitably that you're going to be a better colleague, a better friend, a better husband, a better father. But I think women, and it's a lot of women, to be blunt, I think, that have been waiting for men to could you come around?
Yeah.
And I'm not talking, people mock this stuff like it's all manosphere or, these women are the whole trad wife phenomenon, which, okay, well, honestly, if people want to live that way, that's fine. But that's fundamentally not what it is. It's like people taking their faith seriously and learning the power of God's love and his presence. And who knew that he gave us a way to live? He gave us, like, if nothing else, he's kind of like, there's a whole lot I'd like to teach you, but let's start with these 10 things. Don't do those things. Why? Yeah. Because I'm your jailer? No, because I want you to live happy. And I want you to live an ordered life at the service of other people, which is why I made you, and which is how you will find fulfillment and happiness.
And that's exactly what, like, parents do when they punish or provide structure for their kids, right?
A good parent.
A good parent. A good parent is going to provide, like, structure for their kids that they can develop and learn, and then take the tools that they've been given to by their parents and then apply them to their life.
Yes. And to be blunt, there's generations. I mean, first of all, it's always been a problem is how good are the parents really?
Right.
But there's been arguably 2 or 3 generations of parents who've been really derelict in a coherent understanding of how to be a good parent.
Right.
And, there is somewhat of an on-the-job training aspect of being a parent, and you're very fortunate to be the youngest kid.
11th try charm.
But the other thing in community, back to the idea of what is the role of community in this, think about uncle power or neighbor power. Like, look at your relationship with Travis, right?
Yeah.
You're going to be able to learn things from Travis that you could never learn from me. And it's like anthropological that when young people reach puberty and they're in this they're really in the final phase of sort of leaving from their house of origin, or maybe staying in there in some way, but they're reaching out to the outside world to find guidance and from an interaction from other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so a healthy community for parents, you should be able to look around. In fact, I would make this recommendation to young people: look at the families and the parents that you would like to be like, and spend time with them. And when you're struggling, you've got a problem, like you think that you couldn't call them up and say, hey, could we just have coffee? I just want to know how you've dealt with this. Because odds are they've dealt with something like it before, or something similar.
Right.
Because frankly, like, there's not much new in the world. There just isn't. I mean, yeah, there's AI, there's all these things happening, but the central player in God's creation is man, and there's man and women, to use the proper language. It used to be you could say man and everyone understood it was women, but
right, yeah.
But men and women are the summit of his creation to play a specific, or not specific, a beautiful role of dominion over all of this. And are we wandering too much? Are we getting like too theological? Or
no, I wouldn't say so. I wouldn't say so at all. Like, one thing with like faith, I've had an interesting time trying to relay the message to people of how I think my faith plays a role in like my conservation desires, you could say, but even like my desires with this podcast and stuff. And I've struggled like trying to convey that message, because it's like, I don't want to go too soft necessarily with it, but I also don't want to go like too hard into it, you could say. But it's like, I worry about it from two perspectives. Number one, I could see it as pushing people away from the podcast, because there are times where people will see bringing God into the conversation as irrelevant and as a trigger. And I sympathize to that to a certain extent.
Sure.
I think the other thing that I tend to worry about is I don't want people to listen to this podcast because I'm a Christian or a Catholic conservationist. Yeah. I'm cool if that's like a reason, like a really cool reason that kind of like pushes you over the edge to making this one of your top 3 podcasts, you could say. But I want people to listen to this because they understand the message that I'm trying to portray and that I'm trying to give to people. And that's been an ever developing message. And that they like genuinely see the purpose in that and the desire to learn.
Yeah.
And if you highly appreciate the fact that I bring up God in certain conversations, because I do that, then that's awesome. And I really like that for you.
Yeah.
And I want to be able to do that. But I don't want that to be like the reason.
Yeah. And so I think a good way to think about it is sincerity and naturalness.
Yeah.
And also bear in mind, which grace builds on nature. Mm-hmm. It's not like there's this land of God and this land of everything else.
Yeah.
So when you speak of what it means to be a good conservationist, and if from time to time it's helpful for you to refer to your Christian faith and the intellectual tradition that is intrinsic to it, informs what you do, that's fine, but it's just a natural thing. What you want to do is be the best conservationist you could possibly be, why? Because you want to do this work out of love for God and love for other people. Mm-hmm. And love for creation itself. It's, I think in some of the notes we shared before this, you really brought up something very important, that we love creation. We don't worship creation.
Yeah.
We understand creation to be
God's creation.
the beautiful reflection of God's energy, creativity, that we are blessed to be part of. And that our role is what it was back in the garden, to exercise dominion. But if I could just draw a parallel to my professional life, which wasn't conservation, it's been really business, and it's been banking.
God portrays a pretty big role into that as well, or just in any professional career.
But to your point, I mean, I was blessed to have formation to say, look, just do your profession exceptionally well. And pray about what you do. Ask God to use you as a faithful instrument. And if there's some reason, like, you don't hide that you love our Lord and that you have faith and that you practice it. But it's not really people's hearts respond to the truth. So if you're speaking the truth and you're doing your work well, and whatever references you make to God are just a very natural part of that. It's not like, okay, do you remember when you used to tell me George and I spent a lot, by the way, hi everybody. George and I spent years in the car together, and sometimes we'd pray. Sometimes he'd sleep. We were driving back and forth to school. But I remember in those years, you said, like, I had my God voice, right? You remember telling me that? Like, my voice would change when I was talking about that.
I think I do remember that. But also, like, it just, I mean, that's just a natural thing. But, like, it changes when my voice changes when I go onto the podcast.
But in some sense, you have your podcast voice.
Yeah.
But so you were kind of pimping me about my God voice. And it really made me think. It was like, well, it should be just natural. It should be the same voice. Right? Like, if I'm talking about red oaks, and how we can graze away the buckthorn and the honeysuckle.
Yeah.
But we might have to have goats, or maybe we can use, it should be the same voice.
Yeah.
Because it's and guess what I'm trying to say is, you don't have to be preachy.
Yeah. And that's just what I've tried to avoid. And I feel like I've done it in a very natural sense of, like, if you look for it, it'll be there.
Yes.
Yeah. And, like, I feel like I've done a good job of that, but sometimes I do wonder if I could, like, do it a little bit more and get away with it, you could say. But I do believe in, like, it kind of happening naturally. And I feel like that's the best way that it can happen as well. And also, when I talk to people about conservation a lot, which is what I do, a lot of them do have some spiritual relationship to it in some capacity. And most people aren't, like, religious in some way towards it, but they recognize that there's something there.
Yeah, there's a mystery.
And it's like, then I'm like, okay, well, are you willing to try out this whole, like, Christian thing? And I understand, like, the apprehensiveness to it a little bit, but like when I look at why, like, what my faith is rooted in, it pretty much was, like, when I was searching for a reason, like, I had all the tools that I needed, like faith, like, to build up my faith. All I needed was a reason, which was, like, a little bit of a Thomas kind of issue there, but, like, or doubting Thomas, I guess you could say. But, like, my reason kind of became, around that same time I was getting into hunting, and then conservation, just, like, general land management. And, like, that sort of became my reason, is I was just, like, enamored with God's creation.
Yeah.
And I had, like, a love for it and a love of taking care of it. And that kind of became, like, my why, I guess you could say, behind my faith.
Yeah.
And then that's also how I get into the discussion of the difference between worshiping God, but having, like, a respect and a obligation to take care of his creation, but not worshiping his creation.
Yeah. Right.
And, like, that's been the line that I've been trying to walk, I guess you could say. Because, like, I see when I'm in a deer stand and I'm hunting, like, that is, like, a spiritual retreat for me in some capacity. And it's like, I get a lot of the same things out of that I do from like an actual retreat.
Yeah.
But does that mean hunting and conservation is a replacement for the sacraments? Absolutely not.
No. I think of, so C.S. Lewis wrote a lot about this question of our relationship to the beauty in creation. And I can't quote, which of his writings, where they're from, which books, but he spoke of our desire, when we see beauty, we long to enter into it.
Mm-hmm.
And we appreciate it. We're drawn to it, but it's kind of like we can never actually get over the threshold.
Sure.
To really enter into the fullness of it. And when I make that drive from here to Pier over to our farm in Stoddard, so it's a 3.5 hours and 40-minute drive.
Mm-hmm.
When I get to that last half hour where I'm driving through the windy roads and the driftless,
yeah,
my heart aches at the beauty of it.
Right.
It also feels sadness for the desolation of, how things are being degraded and have been degraded. But there's just a raw isn't the correct word. There's just kind of a awesome beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And I almost experience it as a heartache, like a longing to be deeper into it and to know that I can't. It's only so close I can get.
Right.
And C.S. Lewis, that distance between our desire, the longing, I think I'd be paraphrasing him to say he saw it as a foretaste of heaven.
Mm-hmm.
An analogy to our desire for our eternal union with our Lord in heaven. Because heaven will be, it's not that we don't experience beauty here, but the fullness and the permanence of being into this thing we've been looking at, longing for, nurturing, exercising dominion over, to exercise into it enter into it in an unbroken way.
Right.
It's something he wrote beautifully about. I wish I could remember the essays but it doesn't really matter. And in many ways, that's what I love about Wendell Berry's writing is, again, Wendell Berry is hardly ever explicitly expressing his Christian faith.
What he does in the sex economy, freedom, and community.
He chooses his moments, which honestly we should choose our moments too. But most of his writing just speaks of the beauty and the struggle, like of the human community set within God's creation. He writes of places and people of places and their relationships among each other and the feelings he's got, like many great writers, the way he can express the feelings of spring.
Yeah.
Or of tobacco work when he describes, 4 guys working in the tobacco fields together. It's opening our minds and our hearts to something far beyond us that we are still part of.
Right.
And that we're called to be more and more deeply immersed in, hopefully culminating in our presence forever.
Mm-hmm. I think a piece of that also is, and this is part of the beauty of, our area of Wisconsin is it it's getting back to the community piece of it and the people that are there. And that's a big thing for me is like the beauty of that area. Like if we weren't surrounded by good people in that area, I would not be nearly as attracted to it as I am.
So I wouldn't want to idolize what Wisconsin was when I was a kid, but when I was a kid, the rural fabric, it was all, you get outside the cities and the little towns, it was all a farming landscape, predominantly dairy, predominantly small herd, 25 cows to 40 cows, maybe 50 cows. Hard work. Very generally, the farms were really, really tidy. I mean, I remember early 70s biking through Wisconsin River Valley for a day and a half, just went all the way through it. And just the striking beauty of these small farms and the people who lived and worked there. And to see throughout most of the state, those rural areas are really increasingly desolate in every sense of the word. They're depopulated. I'm not saying everything was perfect 50 years ago. And I'm certainly not saying that, trying to raise a family on a 40 cow dairy herd was an easy thing. But what I'm trying to get to is that kind of got vanquished throughout the state for the most part, except in the southwestern part of the state where you had a combination of factors that.
Mostly just the fact that agriculture is not very scalable there.
It's not intrinsically scalable. There's too many winding hills.
The topography doesn't allow for
it. The soils, it's good, but it's not that good. And so land remained cheap. and then
not anymore.
for a variety of cultural reasons, well, we can talk about that if you want, but for a variety of cultural reasons, Organic Valley developed there. The whole organic movement, arguably, in the country developed in that driftless area, which that way of farming commanded a premium. It kind of kept the farm culture alive to a point where when you and I go over there, we know, quite a few young people still who grew up in that environment on a family farm who, by the way, that's what they want to do. Mm-hmm. And they're not just dreaming. Like there are sort of dreamers from the city who want to be farmers that figure it out. But when you're dealing with a fourth, fifth, sixth generation family that's been farming a certain piece of land, there's an incredible amount of knowledge that is just organically transmitted across and so these guys they're guys and gals, they know how to do it. They know what it is. They're not dreaming about it and they want to do it and they're still out there.
Right. And I think that's something that when I talk about agriculture and I talk about people trying to support their local agriculture and stuff, I sometimes have a hard time asking that of people because it's for an initial price wise, it is more expensive, right? But then B, I just think about the infrastructure that I have there, and it's a significantly easier place to support my local community because it's almost already there.
Yeah, there's a lot of places.
There's a lot of room that we still need to grow in the driftless area of Wisconsin, particularly in Vernon County, but it's so much better than everywhere else in the Midwest in terms of a local community, and in particular, local agriculture, local small scale agriculture.
I suspect there might well be other pockets in the Midwest, but it's true. You could put a bumper sticker on your car in most places in the Midwest and say, support your local farmer. And there's no local farmer to really support for the most part. Or there's not
no local small scale farmer.
Yeah. There's not maybe there's a one-off this or that, but if you wanted to structure your whole diet around buying from a variety of local farmers, the food chain might not be there or only there for certain, things, strawberries or whatever, and
right.
Christmas trees at particular times, which is a wonderful thing. But
that is actually a really awesome thing.
The food, so go for it and build it. By the way, I'm glad, but we can. You know what it's like. We can go to the Viroqua Co-op and all year round you can actually get good local produce.
Yeah,
and that's not the case in many places in rural areas. So.
And I think also it's important for people to keep in mind you don't have to do it all at once. You don't have to when I say start buying from your local farmers, maybe that means you just find someone that you're going to buy asparagus from in the spring or eggs from.
Make the effort you can. Eggs for sure.
Eggs is kind of an easy one. Beef, actually, when I have these conversations with people, I'm like, beef is by far the easiest one.
Yeah.
And it's the most economical for yourself because you're getting, if you're getting grass-fed beef, it's a really high quality product and you're buying it in bulk and it's going to be cheaper than.
And crappy beef ain't cheap anyway.
Yeah, crappy beef ain't cheap.
Yeah.
And so
But George, this is you've thought about it, I've thought about it, others have written about it. Fundamentally, we can say good food is expensive food, or we could say we've spent, I don't know how many decades, 5, 6 decades, having public policy be driven around cheap food.
Yeah.
Like, to the detriment of the farmer, it's just given the work that a real farmer does.
Mm-hmm.
We have a small scale, I'd say overgrown hobby thing, and it takes a lot of work.
It's currently transitioning from a hobby farm into an actual farm, you could say.
Yeah, but not a commercial operation.
It's not a commercial operation, but it's
scaling.
Yeah.
It's because we have a large family and we have a lot of, But literally, if you listen to the public policy dialogue, it literally sounds like the belief is that hunger causes food.
Right.
Which hunger has a causal relationship to food. Demand is what an economist would call it. But demand doesn't bring forth supply without work, production. So our whole way of economic thinking, which applies to everything, but is very apparent in the food supply, is we actually think consumption matters more than production. In the dialogue, right?
It's literally like if the USDA, if their measurement of whether or not we're producing good quality food, if they measured it by whether or not people bought it.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it would be.
Yeah.
And that's also kind of what the USDA is doing.
Yeah, and I think some of that is just an error in thinking.
Yeah.
From my discipline, economics, it sort of originates there, that consumption is the appropriate proxy for production.
Which it kind of makes sense because you're like, people wouldn't spend money if they didn't have it, which isn't true when it comes to food. But people need to eat.
So here's where we can get a little controversial, if it's okay on your podcast.
Yeah.
So look, you and I
no one's going to listen to this anyway.
Yeah,
because do you know why people don't listen to this?
Why?
Because the people that don't share this and comment it.
Yeah, like me, even because I don't know how to share it and comment it, but I do read it. I do listen.
Yeah, you do.
I do, and I do really appreciate the work you do. But the craziness of this demand-driven concept of economic life is consumption is what causes, is the foundational economic reality, was brought home in COVID, when we literally tried to tell everyone to stop producing, but don't worry, we're going to give you money. And so you had all of this money flood into a situation while you were deliberately trying to suppress production. Like, what were you thinking?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you could say there were public policy goals related to health that caused that to be a seemingly rational decision, or if you want to believe it was rational, you're welcome to continue to believe that. But result of all that was hand money to people while you're telling them not to work. You're going to get inflation. And that inflation, by the way, fueled an enormous growth in the gap between the wealthy and the not wealthy. It drove asset prices up, including land prices, to a great extent, because there was nowhere else for the money to go.
Right.
So money for consumption handed out without regard to your incentives for production is bound to get inflation, and that's what's happened. And that's why, to a great extent, in my opinion, there's other factors at work, but that's why life is so unaffordable for young people. And that's why people my age, who, if you had accumulated assets, COVID was great.
COVID was a good time for me.
Go stock market.
I just
my house
sat on the couch all day.
Look, honey, our house price went up. Okay, we didn't have this podcast to review COVID policy, but I'm trying to make the point that we don't think really clearly about.
Well, and this is like kind of I feel like the overarching theme of this conversation is like, well, people just need to realize, like, you can think about this stuff and you don't have to trust the quote experts and the specialists.
No.
And most of the time, like I was listening to a Ron Paul podcast the other day, and he's like, most of the time when I talk to just average people about economic policy, they know a lot more and they have a lot better ideas than almost all the congressmen I know. That wasn't like a direct quote from what he said, but that was like roughly that was the meaning behind what he said.
Yeah.
And
yeah,
I think, I was talking to someone the other day. I was like, you can write your senators an email and your congressmen. People don't realize they can do that.
They can, and some polite staff member will probably reply.
Yes, but you have that ability.
It's legal.
Yeah. It's like whether or not it actually does anything is the question. But so much of this is trying to get people to understand that the entire basis upon what this nation was built on was it is a nation by the people for the people.
Yeah. Kind of a radical.
And we've lost that. Like I was talking to you about how I want to read the Federalist Papers and stuff. A lot of why that is because when I learn like U.S. history and a lot of the principles upon which this nation was founded on, and I look at what we're doing right now, it looks a lot different.
Yeah.
Than what our founding fathers intended. And I want to have like a clear picture as to what they were trying to do.
Yeah.
And I think it's very apparent that is the truth. And the big thing that's so different is that it is no longer a government by the people and for the people.
I won't pretend to like know the Federalist Papers inside and out. I'm certainly not a constitutional scholar. I'm a student of history, but I think the whole thrust of the project was to be decentralized.
Yeah.
And to keep power diffuse. That's why we have the three branches of government, and provide some of a check on each other. But it's also, there was no income tax. There was no like huge federal treasury, which was going to, declare the winners and losers and hand out money to whatever people were expedient for whatever political or policy reasons that was on the agenda at the time. And over 2.5 centuries, or certainly in the last 120 years, the centralization of money and power at a federal and a state level has gone in a direction that I don't think most of the founding documents contemplated. In fact, they were sort of designed to prevent that kind of thing, but it's happened anyway. And
we're way too young of a nation to forget where we started. Like, we're 250 years or something. No, we're coming up on 300, right? Somewhere around there. 250, I think, is what it is. It's like
we're coming up on 250.
Yeah. Like that is way too young for us to forget the principles and the basis on which this country's been founded on. And part of the problem is because we've had stuff like the Industrial Revolution happen in the middle of it, where it feels like such a long time ago.
I'm trying to think of this, George, but here's one way to think about it when you're my age. Like, I knew my great-grandfather, George Ehrhardt, whose father, Johann, had come from Germany, and he was Iowa. Johann came to Iowa, and George was one of his sons. He was my grandfather, Lou's father. Lou was born in, I think, 1898, my grandfather, and I'm going to guess George was 1870.
Yeah.
Something like that. Johann was 1850-ish. So let's go with George, because I actually knew him.
Yeah, my great uncle George, just to clarify.
No. Your my great grandfather, your great great grandfather, George Ehrhardt, was Lou's.
Yes.
So I knew him because I think he died at 102. But let's say he was born in 1878, which was 102 years after the Revolution. So in my lifetime, I span back to more than half of the life of the nation.
Yeah.
If I go back to the people that I actually knew and when they were born, we're a pretty young place.
Yeah. And part of the reason why, like we just don't think of it in that way is because, AI just came out 4 years ago. And when this nation was founded, we were still using sailboats.
Yeah. So where do we go with all this? Because I don't know that it was going to change.
Yeah, of course. And it should change.
And we're not going back to the Jeffersonian era where, I don't know, I think the population was maybe 13 million or something like that. It's
right. 13 colonies.
340 right now. 350 maybe. Not sure that we have an accurate count. In fact, I'm sure we don't.
Yeah.
But things were going to change. And it was, growing and trying to accommodate all that and accommodate the immigration that we've had over the centuries. Things were going to change, and we're not, like, this conversation you and I are having is not about, like, I'm not ready to go back to a world without cars.
No, neither.
But I can look at it and say, in my lifetime, we could have handled this whole car thing differently. We could have invested in public transportation infrastructure. We didn't have to put all of our emphasis on highways and individual vehicles from a policy point of view. We could have done a lot of things differently that would have changed the shape of the landscape and the way we live.
Well, and I would also say, like, yeah, of course it was always going to change, but there was stuff in place to make it, or to try and help it change in a certain way.
In a certain way, right.
And I feel like that didn't work. And that's why we kind of need to revisit how we...
Arguably what changed it to a great extent, the events that wind up lurching the change forward are often wars.
Yeah. Right. Well, and you look at, like, what's the big problem right now? And executive orders is one of them.
Yeah.
And that was like that came in because of stuff like that, or at least, like, it became a lot more acceptable to use that.
So wars, and World War I was a huge change, but nowhere near as great as World War II, because when you take all those men off of farms and small towns and make soldiers out of them, someone's got to do that work. And that causes a great deal of change. And so wars make a dramatic change. I don't know. Yeah. There's just a lot of factors.
It's hard to narrow, It's hard to narrow it down to one thing because it wasn't one thing. But I think getting back to the purpose of why I asked you to come on the podcast tonight was, when I'm trying to look at why I'm doing this podcast.
Yep.
I think a lot of it has to do with trying to provide people with something to go off of to develop their own thoughts about how we are supposed to interact with nature and a way to have an impact with it. And that relates to this conversation somewhat of just, like, trying to get people to actually, like, not just sit there and passively watch things happen.
Yes,
it's to try and get people to actually be involved. Yes. Because that's if you go back and listen to the episode I did with Thomas Milsna, that was what I talked about probably 3 or 4 different times. I brought it up, was like, people need to accept that we are supposed to have an impact.
Yeah.
Whether it's with nature or the economy or policy in any way, it's like the whole purpose of this thing is designed that you're going to have an impact.
Here's how stupid I've been, George. And I've been gardening a long time, and I planted trees, and I appreciate nature. But I didn't really realize, I started to dawn on me about 10 years ago, let's say, that leaving land fallow, like farmland or forest land, it doesn't revert to some previous natural state if you just leave it alone.
Yeah.
At least not for centuries, right? And
it would just be different.
Yeah.
It wouldn't revert back to anything. It would just be different.
So we're going to operate on creation. Ut operator, like God placed man in the garden to work, to operate within creation. And maybe to go from this sort of esoteric you kind of got to get back to a point. Why don't we all do the good we can do in the time we have and the places we touch and the people we touch?
Just try to be the best person you can be.
Because you and I aren't going to fix the United States. Maybe we should certainly participate in civic life. We should feel free to write letters. We should undertake our responsibility to influence policy, to vote, to inform people. But we can always do the work that we can do. Yeah. And you should not neglect, because you can get discouraged in a hurry if you look at the whole state. I mean, look, we have a war going on. Like, where don't we have a war going on? But, Iran, Ukraine, Israel, Gaza,
whatever happened in Venezuela.
Lebanon.
Yeah.
It's like war. You could get really discouraged. Like, why should I plant a tree?
Well,
so why should you plant a tree?
And
why should we root out the buckthorn?
Yeah, and that's kind of what I try to explain to people is it's like, for as long as people have been on the planet, we've had a major impact on the ecosystem. And if you look at just our farm in Wisconsin, right? I don't even know how far you would have to go back to look at what is the untouched natural human state of that area.
Right.
Because
we think it was Oak Savannah, but that wasn't.
Yeah, and let's look at what Oak Savannah is, right? It was essentially just a large-scale managed grazing system where Native Americans would burn a section in the fall so that in that coming spring, it would be a lush pasture for buffalo and elk to go and graze. And then that's where they would hang out for that year. And then they would kill those buffalo and elk, pretty much like the majority of them. They would harvest them. And it was just a massive farming operation.
Yeah.
And that's what I'm trying to convey is and I play the two worlds between that, like the two major worlds of land management, which is whitetail hunting, private land, which there's more. I heard this on the Wired to Hunt podcast the other day of there's more acres owned for recreational hunting than there is national parks in the U.S. Just to explain how big of an impact that has. That's huge. And then the other world is agriculture, which is even more much more enormous than that. And I try to play both those roles, and I try to just express the mindsets people need to have of this can be done in a way that is paralleled with nature. And is a way that we're not destructive to it in any capacity.
Yeah, we can make it better.
Yeah. And that's so different and so wild to people. Yeah. That we have the power to actually make nature better. And then you can take this conversation all the way back to Genesis 1.
Well, let's do that after we take a short break.
Okay.
Okay, and then we'll try to bring this thing to a punchy
end. Okay.
Well, we don't have to end it right away.
Okay, we're back.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Whatever we eat or drink, let us do all for the honor and glory of God and the good of our souls.
Okay. So I just brought up going back to Genesis chapter 1 and kind of this discussion around in it. I don't have the direct quote up with me, but just God basically tells Adam and Eve to have dominion over his creation. And people, I hear Christian conservationists bring that up, that specific chapter up or verse up a lot. And in particular, the discussion is around the word dominion.
Mm-hmm.
And there is kind of there's always two, not always, but there's with words like that, there's tends to be two different definitions. There's the Webster Dictionary definition, and then there's the societal / like just cultural definition of it.
What do you think the cultural
and
definition?
The cultural definition I feel like behind dominion is they tend to relate it to some ruler or lord,
like dominance.
Yeah, that like in some capacity exploits the thing that they have quote dominion over.
Yeah, so I'm not a licensed Latinist, but if I'm not mistaken, the term dominion is similar to domus, D-O-M-U-S, which I think is just home. And so for one to exercise dominion over a home, you're caring for God's creation. Because back to, a garden needs tending.
Right.
And maybe before the fall, that would have been a little easier. But the plan always was, God did not desire the fall.
At least I hope not. He says he didn't.
No. But preceding the fall, our job was to be like the caretaker.
Yeah.
The one who looks after the home of creation. And so it wasn't like we didn't have a job before. And so the idea of dominion, I think, properly understood, whatever it is understood to mean in the current context, properly understood in the sense of the scripture, in Genesis, is that sort of a steward, the one who cares for the home, the caretaker,
right?
The gardener.
And like that's kind of what I think the real contextual definition is, is to like, he's telling Adam and Eve to like give themselves to it.
And again, work was good.
Yeah.
Creation was, and if you go back a little bit earlier in the first chapter of Genesis, all of those days, and God saw that it was good. And then he made men and women good, to love him, to serve him, to exercise care, dominion, to give names to the animals, to tend the garden. And so things changed with the fall, but not the fundamental task.
No.
Like creation is still needs care. We still have a job to do, and it isn't to just exploit it. It's to make it fruitful.
Have you ever noticed like when a lot of the parables Jesus talked about, and this could also just once again be contextual that he did this because this was just like a common thing that people understood, but a lot of them did revolve around farmers in some capacity.
Sure. So
I always found that interesting of, once again, that could just be because of the times and people were familiar with it, but also like there might be something there,
Yeah. Fundamentally it probably was because that's what people did and that's what they knew, but that doesn't mean it doesn't have applicability. The sower went out to sow, some seed fell on rocky ground,
Yeah.
And some actually yielded 100-fold, but the point was to sow. Or, one that's actually really pertinent culturally and for the kind of work we're trying to do in restoration or anyone's trying to do is the weed and the weeds. We don't, like God didn't say, like, should we go pull all the weeds out? God said, no, wait for the harvest. And they'll grow together and that it'll all get sorted out,
right?
At the harvest. So our job when we're caring for the land isn't to eradicate everything that isn't directly fruitful. It's to be fruitful, make it fruitful, work on it, but it's not about stomping out everything, and you'll drive yourself nuts if you try to.
Yeah, we can't just manicure it to ourselves.
Right. You can do that if you want to have like an English lawn garden, and God bless you if you do. If that's where you live and that's
yeah, right.
That's what you have, put your heart into it. But when you're dealing with larger acreage, it's
You're probably the first person to say on a conservation-based podcast that God bless someone who cares for their lawn.
Well, I think there's so much, George, whether it's in our faith or just in intellectual discussions with people, we tend to make perfect the enemy of good. Like we actually really want to do the little we can do to make things even. You know what? There's even situations in life where making it a little less bad it counts too.
Yeah. And I think that's part of this whole conversation is it's really hard to look at all this stuff, or it's really easy to just look at all this stuff and get really down about it and really sad and just like give up, you could say. And that was actually something that I remember in the early, very like a couple months into this, I went on Larry Smith's podcast, who's like kind of a, he's like a local fishing celebrity, you could say. And I
remember that one.
Yeah. And I talked to, he had me on his podcast, and I remember just being on the phone, and I was so nervous because I was so new to this. And I was like, he was asking me all sorts of questions about the podcast and stuff, and I was like struggling to answer them. And I just remember trying to say, like, one thing I want to do is I feel like media has just pushed people into such a negative mindset towards nature and our relationship with it. And that's something that I want to root out and like fight back against. And I wasn't really quite able to express that super well on that podcast, but that is one of my desires and one of my goals is, get regular people to recognize their impacts, but then the people that do listen to this stuff and realize I want to do something, to provide something that they can actually do and to give them examples of how they can do it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you've come a long way as a podcaster. I mean, it's always been kind of interesting to hear how it develops, but you're growing in your discipline of it, and your confidence in what you're trying to do is a lot clearer, and that's a good thing.
Well, and I think it was also like really cool for me to, start it without really a clear picture as to what I was doing. Not at all. Like a lot of people start podcasts having been involved in some sort of podcast capacity, whether they were producing for a show or maybe they were just like in the hunting industry for a little while as like a salesman and they knew lots of people. For me, like I was 16 and I just bought a set of $200 mics, and then I started calling up people from the DNR to interview them. And I think it was a really cool experience for me to sort of develop my skills and what I wanted to actually do with the podcast. And I'm still actively developing what I want to do with it.
I think what comes through when you listen to a number of these episodes is you're just really trying to learn, and you're trying to help people think. And I'm kind of impressed that you will laugh about how many listeners you have, and it's growing, but it's it's like doesn't bother you. Like you're not trying to achieve a revenue goal. Yeah, you'd like some sponsors, but above all, you just want to learn. And you want to help other people learn. And that comes through.
And also, like, the reason why I want sponsors is because if this is where my passion is, I want to do it to the best ability that I can. And, making, like, equipment upgrades and all that kind of stuff is, like, a lot easier when I have a follow. Like, it's a lot easier on my mind doing that when I have people listening to it. So that's really, like, the only reason why I want that stuff. But, It has been cool to just treat it from a genuine perspective.
Yeah. And I hear the growth. I see it. I really appreciate the people that are willing to talk. It's kind of amazing.
It is amazing.
It's, you talk to people are very willing to spend time. And I think they're intrigued by the fact that there's somebody young really trying to do this. And I think the sincerity of it comes through, and you have a variety of guests, and like when you and I sat down with Austin, Frerick,
yeah.
that was really intriguing conversation. In my mind, I've been continuing the conversation with him. Actually, I'm reading his book, which I kind of understood the substance of before, but now I'm really reading it. But and there's a lot of things that I would say to Austin, mostly to like things we would agree on, but some that would be, have you thought about this, dude? Like he does, he didn't have any time for Wendell Berry, or I don't think he even heard of Paul Kingsnorth, but he's just not in that, what he would refer to as nostalgic, and
that's fair. I get why he isn't.
We're not trying to reconstruct a 1930s world, in the 1920s world, say just pre the horses were replaced by tractors kind of thing. No, we're not trying to do that. There's no going back, but there's a lot you can learn from literature.
Oh yeah.
A lot you can learn from other thinkers, and there does have to be heart in this, and the human part of it. I mean, this would be my challenge to Austin if we get to carry our conversation, is politics of it all really matters. But if you think there's a party or a political program that's gonna, the cavalry ain't coming. They're not gonna fix what's going on in the rural economy. There's too much. I mean, why do we have such a consumer-driven economy? Because consumers want a consumer-driven economy. And why do politicians support measures? Well, because people that produce products want it to be a consumer economy, but also because politicians want to get, it's like Amazon. So many people dislike the whole idea of Amazon, but they use it every day.
Well, I talk about Walmart a lot. Like, I just hate Walmart.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons to hate Walmart, but at the same time, people up at Michigan Tech have two places they can buy their groceries from. It's the Econo Foods across the road from Walmart, or Walmart. Walmart's technically closer, and you can get a lot more things from Walmart.
Yeah. So a less toxic version of Walmart isn't really an attractive proposition.
Yeah. And
excuse me.
And yeah, we kind of got doom and gloomy there for a little bit again.
Well, it has been a theme, and it shouldn't be a theme. Like, our lives should be filled with joy.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing. I actually saw a post on Instagram the other day, and it was like, why don't we ever overthink the good outcome? Like, we're always like, if you're thinking about, like, there's two ways that something can go, or I can make this decision, and there's going to be two outcomes. It's either going to be really good or really bad, and we always overthink the bad stuff. It's like, why don't we ever overthink the good stuff? And it's because we're scared.
Yeah. So in morning prayer, I'm trying to spend time, like, just being grateful, identifying what I'm grateful for. But isn't it funny how all the good things that happen, we just kind of put in our pocket, and maybe we say a quick thank you internally. Maybe it's something we've been praying about for a long time. And we just kind of put it in our pocket, and we move right on to the next thing that ain't right.
Yeah.
And I would say this, what does that have to do with all the conservation stuff we're talking about? There's so much beauty there.
Oh, yeah.
Go out there and enjoy it. I mean, you look at the state of Wisconsin, there's still a lot of wonderful parks. You can say, what should the DNR do or not do, or aren't they? There's a lot of really fine people working at the DNR, that many of whom have talked with you, who are passionate about the work they do. And there's a lot of good farmers. I think there's large scale farms that, where people are working hard, if you're going to do large scale, to do it better, do it in a more human way, I guess. I'm trying to be really nice about all that, but people are trying, and we should all try too.
Yeah.
And there's so much to be grateful for.
No, absolutely. It gets easier to remember to thank God for stuff the more you do it.
Good for you.
But that's what I would say.
Sometimes I think, like, Bob, you dope. You're sitting here praying about the next problem, and you didn't even notice hardly about the things that got solved.
Yeah.
Or and
it's hard when you have so many things happening at once.
Yeah, and
like I have it a lot with the farm, of just like, I'll notice something that we're doing and I'm like, oh, that's not great. We need to fix that. But then sometimes I do forget of like all the cool stuff that's happening. That
you look at what's happened in
awesome.
2 years over there. It's unbelievable. And yeah, that's a very good point. But I worry about what's not done. I don't look too much at, wow, look at all this.
And when I brought Mary Anderson over midsummer or late summer last year, she was just like, you guys have been here for a year and a half. You guys have done a lot.
Yeah.
But yeah, I just think getting back to, it's been this whole podcast has just been an awesome journey for me. And like, I hope for a handful of people out there that it's been a good thing for them too.
Yeah, it's been great to see you blossom and learn, and I'm learning through the work that you're doing, and I know some others are too. I wanted to say that it sort of on this gratitude theme and looking at problems as opposed to, it helps me in my day if I remind myself, you want to wake up in the morning and assume that everything's going to be in order.
Yeah.
But you ought to kind of realize everything's not going to be in order. And what happens if you start with the premise that everything's going to be in order, as soon as you hit a roadblock, before you've had a second cup of coffee, you can get all flustered.
Right.
If you just know that your day is going to be governed to a great extent by problems and situations and blessings that you don't know about and can't anticipate very well, then you don't get all rattled. And you can go about the real work of how do we make things a little better? How do we restore light, beauty, goodness to creation, and especially to the community of people around us who we actually know?
Yeah.
That's
absolutely.
That's enough for a lifetime. And by the way,
it may only be one person that you are supposed to have that impact to.
You really won't know. I mean, if you really were impacting a lot of people, there's great danger of pride.
Right.
So our Lord doesn't always show you what your impact is, but you can be confident, God works one soul at a time and one plot of land at a time. And so if we can just elevate the creation around us, the people around us, if we can keep ourselves moving in a sort of God-directed thing on the upward plane of the Christian life, that's enough for the day.
Yeah, definitely. So,
cheers.
If you were to take away something from this episode, like the purpose of this episode was to try and convey to people the message that I'm trying to bring. And hopefully if this resonates with you, you get fired up enough to share this with other people. It's literally like, I feel bad bringing it up in episodes, but like it is the only way that I am going to grow. And literally, if you're sitting in your car right now driving to work, when you just park your car, send this to just one person. That's all I'm asking for right now, is to just send this to one person. I literally don't care who that is. Just one person.
Yeah.
It's going to take 2 seconds, and it's going to help me out in the spreading of this message out so much.
Yeah.
And it is the only way that this is going to happen.
Well, thanks for your work, George. Thanks to everybody who listens. And
yeah. Thank you.
Go forth, be fruitful and multiply.
Cool.
Thank you.
Thank you guys for listening to today's episode. Please be sure to go and check out our sponsor, Just Landed Lanyards, over on Instagram. They make duck lanyards, dog leashes, binocular slings, gun slings, all that kind of stuff. It's all handmade, really high quality stuff. So please make sure to go and check them out. Follow them on Instagram, message them what you want, and they're going to get you hooked up. Also, just a reminder to please share this with anybody you think would find this interesting. It's pretty much the only way that I'm going to grow is by you guys spreading the word that this podcast exists, as well as comment any questions you have about it.
or suggestions as to what I should do in the future, even production wise as to how the episodes go. So anything you guys want to comment, please be sure to comment it and I will definitely respond to it. And thank you guys again for listening to this episode.